So, all right, we that's enough there. If y'all, I want to hear your thoughts on all of that. So, comment, shoot us messages. But we need to talk about Julian Assange because there are some new developments, and this one is near and dear to Hannah's heart. So, Hannah, first, let's just start. Maybe give us the 60-second overview. Who is Julian Assange? What did he get in trouble for? And then let's talk about the latest development.
Yeah, so Julian Assange is somebody I care a lot about and represents a lot of things I think are very important. He is an Australian journalist. I believe around 2006, he founded the company Wikileaks, which started doing, really, it was kind of the first of its kind, doing investigative journalism, really working within the grassroots to break information and trying to call attention to crimes being carried out by governments and really shining a light on corruption and trying to help people hold their leaders accountable. Within about 4 or 5 years of him starting WikiLeaks, he was approached by somebody at the time, Bradley Manning. Bradley Manning has transitioned and is now Chelsea Manning. But she was a whistleblower who was in the U.S. military and was overseas and basically uncovered war crimes that our government was carrying out in the Iraq War and in the Afghanistan War, and became deeply concerned about what she was discovering and broke ranks and contacted Julian Assange to try to help alert the American people to what was being done. And I think they're both heroes. You know, when you look at what Chelsea did, people who sign up for the military as a whole are doing it because they very much believe in the principles of our government. They very much believe in the Constitution, and they often believe that they are being sent to fight for those things. And then they get over there and they recognize pretty quickly that that's not what's happening. That's not what they're fighting for. That's not what they're actually carrying out, and that oftentimes they're doing the opposite of these things overseas and actually carrying out mass civil liberties violations and really hurting democracies. And so she blew the whistle. Julian Assange published the information. This information was pretty gruesome, and I covered this in a piece at base-politics.com. You can read and put some links in, but one of the things they released was a video that's come to be known as collateral murder that showed U.S. military members.
It's so disturbing. I've seen it. It's so disturbing.
It's blood chilling to watch. They kill multiple civilians, journalists, and they're laughing about it in the video. It's a really horrific thing to watch. She also helped him reveal what came to be known as the Iraq War Papers and the Afghanistan War Papers that revealed essentially that the U.S. government knew we were carrying out war crimes, and also that the U.S. government knew that these operations were failing and were continuing to push propaganda on the American people, saying the opposite and waste our resources. The list goes on, but what was revealed was significant. The American people had every right to know that these things were being done in our name and with our tax dollars. This is what journalists should be doing, is uncovering this kind of information and helping the people hold their government accountable. That's why our founders were so intentional with protecting a free press. They knew that without a free press, the American people would never have the resources that they need to actually be participative in their system and know what's going on. So Julian Assange was immediately persecuted, as was Chelsea Manning, under the Espionage Act. And essentially, Chelsea was already back in the States, so they were able to apprehend her. She was put in jail, given a very punitive sentence, has suffered being put in isolation, multiple suicide attempts. They continue to try to threaten her and try to make her hand over information on Julian Assange. She refuses to, so she at times, I think I would consider, has been a political prisoner as well. Julian was overseas, and so they have been trying to get their hands on
But Chelsea Manning was released by Obama, right? Commuted?
Yes. Her sentence was commuted after 7 years, so she is free, although they have tried to apprehend her and basically I think it was right around the beginning of 2020, in their pursuit of Julian Assange, they've continued to harass her and try to hold her and do lots of corrupt things still. So she's somebody else we need to be concerned about and have our eye on. But Julian was overseas, and basically they kind of cornered him. He ended up in the UK, and he sought refuge at the Ecuadorian embassy. And he ended up living there, I believe, for about 7 years as a political refugee. And then because of some disputes with the Ecuadorian embassy, he was kicked out, and the UK government then apprehended him. He's been in high security prison there ever since. So he is a political prisoner who is being held for merely telling the truth about what our government was doing. And it's pretty obvious to see why they hate him, because what he released, I think, had a significant...
Hang on. Before we get into this, I do have a question. So he's a little different from some other whistleblowers because he didn't just publish the information. He helped hack it with Chelsea Manning into the government computer systems, right? That's what they're going after him for, in addition. Because that's like the New York Times publishes classified info that gets leaked to them all the time. The government doesn't lock him up. But he actually helped access information they weren't supposed to have through some computer stuff, right?
He faces 17 charges of espionage and 1 charge of computer hacking. So yes, that is mixed up in there a little bit. I don't think he actually physically hacked into a computer. I think he gave Chelsea some tips for how she might access the information that she knew was there. But that's kind of getting a bit more into the weeds. But yes, all of that does combine to make the charges he faced pretty significant. And the U.S. government has been working for the past decade to try to have him extradited here. Now, the UK government was not initially cooperative with that because all of Europe and pretty much most of first world countries don't have the death penalty anymore, haven't had it in decades. And so a lot of them have a policy that they won't extradite people to countries where they might face the death penalty because it's considered a human rights violation throughout most of the Western world. And so there was concerns given the charges that he faces were he to be extradited to the U.S. that he might face the death penalty or really horrific prison conditions. The U.S. has been lobbying and working behind the scenes to try to guarantee that would not happen. But regardless of what they say, it is still likely he would face pretty significant time. Actually, let's roll this clip from one of his attorneys real fast.
My name's Jennifer Robinson. I'm legal counsel for Julian Assange and for Wikileaks and have been representing Julian for over a decade. This is the outcome that we have been concerned about for the last decade. This decision is a grave threat to freedom of speech, not just for Julian, but for every journalist and editor and media worker in this country. He faces 175 years in prison for publishing information for which he's won journalism awards the world over and has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. This should shock and concern everyone, every citizen, every journalist, every editor, every media organisation. We will continue to appeal. This is not the end of the road, and we will use every appeal mechanism available to us to prevent this extradition. We continue to call upon the Biden administration to drop this case because of the grave threat it poses to free speech everywhere and across the United States, and we continue to call on the Australian government to take action and to protect this Australian citizen who is at risk.
So as you can see, they still feel very uncertain about his future were he to come here. I don't think anybody really feels he'd get a fair trial. And he would probably still face at least up to 175 years in jail if he were convicted in the U.S., though Americans continue to try to say that it would be lower than that. So there's no really saying what they do and what they won't do, because right now they're just lobbying to get him here. But Amnesty International Secretary General Agnes Callenard said that extraditing Assange would put him at great risk and sends a chilling message to journalists the world over. So regardless of what the actual outcome would be, there's everybody kind of is in agreement that it would probably be a pretty punitive punishment. And it's important to remember this guy was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize for his work. He exposed war crimes. This is somebody who has been working on behalf of the people. But I think one reason he is so hated on both the left and right is that what he exposed actually did, I think, help change American sentiment towards these wars and really started making a lot of people question what we were doing over there. And that's the one thing that DC won't abide by, right? They want their wars. Both the right and left are in on this. They make a lot of money off of it. And so they hate his guts. And then on the left, he had some people who were, traditionally anti-war who supported him. But he also then exposed the DNC basically rigging their elections in 2016 and what they did to kind of knock Bernie Sanders off out of the race and put Hillary Clinton in. And so now the left just hates him no matter what because of that. So he's got a lot of political enemies. I actually, after doing some work on this previously, was contacted by his brother. I've been in contact with him ever since. He and the family and their attorneys are continuing to work to appeal these decisions and are working very hard for his release. They are asking senators specifically to work to try to have him pardoned. I see no real hope of that from Joe Biden. Let's not forget Joe Biden is the person who chased Edward Snowden into Russia for also exposing the U.S. government's crimes. Joe Biden is team government all the way. I don't think he's somebody who would ever be on the side of civil liberties in this regard, or really most of the time in general. But I really am concerned if Julian Assange gets extradited here. Of course, this is still an ongoing process. It will probably be months before we really know. But the fact that the UK government has now signaled they're willing to hand him over essentially is quite frightening. And it's something that as a journalist myself, I find quite chilling.
Yeah, and that's where it really comes in, because some people will say he's not a real journalist. And it's like, first off, the First Amendment doesn't make an exception for like, oh, only accredited journalists at a good institution that has the mainstream approval or anything like that. And that would be a very dangerous path to go down. Anybody has the freedom of press whenever they are acting as a journalist. And that means publishing messages or information that are of public interest about the government absolutely qualifies. And so I do think it's concerning because so many things are leaked that we would never know about that the government has done. I mean, it's just terrible to think that we wouldn't know what they've done in terms of killing those civilians, in terms of the Afghanistan papers and how much of a failure that war was. There's so many things that have been leaked to journalists that we then find out what the government is doing. What are we supposed to do? Rely on the government to tell on themselves, to be transparent with us? That's just hopelessly naive. So this idea that this makes him the bad guy, I think the real bad guy is whoever made the order to kill civilians and then whoever laughed about it here. There are criticisms to be made of Assange, and I don't really know enough about it to know whether they're legitimate or not. I mean, I've read about people saying that he only releases dirt on the US and never on Russia or other corrupt governments. I don't really know if that's true, but I almost think it doesn't really matter. I mean, if what he's releasing is true, it's true, regardless of the origins, even if Russia leaked it or whatever it might be. And even if he's not maybe applying the same scrutiny to other countries, okay, I mean, sure, but that doesn't make him not doing an actual service to us, and it doesn't make what he's saying not true. So to me, those seem like, I don't really know enough to even say if those are legit criticisms, but regardless, they kind of seem off topic to me, or like they miss the point.
I mean, one person can't do everything, right? That's like saying we don't criticize other governments enough. We know about what the U.S. government's doing. That's our area of expertise. We know about public policy here. I might make criticisms from time to time about other countries and their government, but one person cannot possibly do it all, cover all the corruption that's out there. So I find that to be kind of a silly arguing point. There's also people who will try to say that when he exposed these things, he got people killed and he like put people's lives in danger. But that camp can never produce even one single tiny shred of evidence to that effect. There's no reason to think that what he released actually ever got anybody killed. What it did is it killed the propaganda for the war machine that was going on for those wars overseas, but there's no indication that the information he released actually was classified, quote, quote, or actually really hurt the military members who were overseas. So there's a lot of, I think, bad faith arguments going against Julian Assange that actually trace back to the fact that people don't like what he's revealed, right? It hurts their camp, it hurts their narrative, and there's, a lot of people who really hate truth tellers and people who will speak out. The bigger problems I see is worldwide. Freedom of the press has been diminishing for some time, specifically in places in Europe, right? We continue to see a progression away from really standing for free speech. Their laws have not been as good as ours around free speech or the free press. And America's kind of been considered like the bastion, right, for journalists and for people who want to be able to talk about what government's actually doing. And so to see the U.S. government perpetrating this actual like full campaign against Julian Assange for a decade, spending God knows how much money and resources trying to get him extradited here, is really indicative of how fast we're declining and how quickly we're moving away from truly supporting freedom of the press and free speech. I think it's scary to see how few journalists in America are speaking out in favor of Assange and really elevating this issue even. It's just something that I think is, it's indicative of a deeper problem in the system. This is bigger than just Julian Assange, though certainly we are concerned with his, individual liberty in life, but it really is something that represents a much bigger problem, in my opinion.